I was invisible. Not because I lacked talent, not because I had nothing to say, but because I wore a uniform that people rarely look twice at. I served coffee, cleared dishes, adjusted the room temperature when someone waved their hand without a word. And for 3 days, I stood silently in the corner of the most expensive hotel suite in Manhattan, watching titans of industry argue over billions as if I wasn't even there, until everything collapsed and I spoke. "You're wrong about section 4.3, I said, in perfect Arabic. Every head turned, every mouth froze. The sheikh, who hadn't cracked a smile in 3 days, blinked, stunned. The negotiators stiffened. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. I wasn't supposed to talk. I wasn't supposed to know what they were discussing. I wasn't supposed to understand their dialect, let alone the fine print of their agreement. But I did. I understood all of it, because behind the uniform, behind the quiet smile and the service role, I was something they never expected. A trained expert, a strategist, a woman who had built financial models that shaped cities. And in that moment, I had to make a choice. Stay silent or speak up and change everything. What would you do if you were me? Stick around, because this story will change the way you see the people around you. Subscribe to John's stories for more unforgettable moments like this one, delivered with heart every day.
The tension in Suite 8701 of the Windsor Grand Hotel could be sliced with a knife. The crystal chandelier above shimmered softly, casting elegant light across a boardroom table lined with the world's most powerful men. On one side sat Charles Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Capital, his crisp navy suit impeccably pressed, his silver hair brushed back like armor. Across from him, seated with steely composure, was Sheikh Rashid Al Karim, a key figure from the Gulf's most influential sovereign wealth fund. Between them, a $5 billion deal, one of the largest real estate partnerships ever proposed in New York City. A sprawling, sustainable development project that promised to transform 6 city blocks into a futuristic green district. But after 3 days of negotiations, the deal was unraveling. Whitmore's team had flown in legal advisors, finance consultants, and even 2 elite translators vetted by the State Department. Yet miscommunication persisted. Every word seemed to carry double meaning. Each offer was met with suspicion. The sheikh, though outwardly composed, had grown visibly agitated. The translator struggled to keep up with his switch to dialectal Arabic, layered with technical investment jargon. They hadn't noticed the woman in the corner. Madeline Rivera, dressed in the hotel's simple black and white uniform, had been replenishing the coffee and water trays, fluffing pillows, and disappearing into the background like she was trained to. But over the past 72 hours, as plates were cleared and espresso cups replaced, she had absorbed every detail of the negotiation, every clause, every concern, every cultural misfire. She wasn't meant to be part of the story, not in their eyes. But when Sheikh Rashid broke into a fast-paced tirade in Arabic, frustrated by what he perceived as intentional financial maneuvering, Madeline's instincts kicked in. "If I may, Your Excellency," she said, her voice low but unwavering in perfect Gulf Arabic. The room froze. Heads turned, eyes narrowed, even the translators looked stunned. Charles blinked. "What?" The sheikh slowly turned toward the voice, his brow furrowed, searching for the source. There, standing by the coffee service with a tray in hand, was the maid. "You speak my dialect?" he asked in Arabic, a mix of disbelief and curiosity edging his voice. "Yes, Your Excellency," Madeline replied, her tone respectful but steady. "And if I may clarify, I believe there's a misunderstanding regarding Section 4.3, the clause about performance-based voting rights. It's not a trap, it's a mutual safeguard." There was a silence thicker than before. One of the sheikh's advisors leaned in, whispering rapidly in his ear. Recognition flashed in his eyes. "You were on the Al-Nur Sustainable Project," he said, switching to English so the room could hear. "Your models were unconventional, but brilliant. Thank you, sir. That was part of my work before I returned to the States. Whitmore stood up slowly. I'm sorry, do you work for this hotel? I do, Mr. Whitmore. I'm currently pursuing my PhD in financial engineering at Columbia. Working here allows me to cover tuition and support my family. The room remained in stunned silence. Madeline took a breath, her voice calm as ever. For the last 3 days, I've heard every detail of this negotiation. I didn't mean to intrude, but I believe your translators are missing some crucial contextual meaning in Sheikh Rashid's concerns, particularly regarding governance authority in the event of market underperformance. The Sheikh looked at her differently now, not as an employee, but as a peer, a former colleague even. Would you assist us in clarifying these matters? With proper compensation, of course. She hesitated only briefly. I can give you an hour before my evening class. After that, I'll need to make arrangements with the hotel. Whitmore exhaled, nodding. We'll make those arrangements. Please, join us. She stepped forward and took a seat, not at the periphery, but at the center of the table. Her presence shifted the tone in the room. The temperature dropped, the tension loosened, and the conversation began again, this time in earnest. What unfolded in that suite reminds me of a story I once heard from a former Google engineer, a brilliant woman who started her tech career not behind a laptop, but as a night janitor at a co-working space. No one saw her. No one asked her name. But one night, when a server error threatened to erase 3 startups' code, she quietly approached the panicking engineers and walked them through a fix. She had built the very system they were using in her past job. Within a month, she had a desk, a badge, and a salary 10 times what she earned sweeping floors. Invisibility is often a matter of perception, not ability. Back in the Windsor Grand, Madeline translated, clarified, and reframed the deal. She explained that Whitmore's insistence on performance metrics wasn't a slight, but a regulatory necessity under U.S. corporate governance law. She reassured Rashid that the voting clauses could be structured to ensure parity, not dominance. Within 45 minutes, progress had been made. Voices were no longer raised, legal pads filled with notes, laptops were opened instead of slammed shut. The Sheikh's senior advisor leaned over and said in Arabic, "She understands us better than our own legal team. She understands both worlds, which is precisely what this partnership requires." Whitmore, humbled but practical, leaned toward Madeline. "Would you consider staying on as a consultant for the duration of these talks? I'd need to arrange for someone to cover my shifts." "We'll handle it," he promised. She nodded once, returning to the document draft, already making edits.
The following day, the transformation was both subtle and profound. At precisely 2:15 p.m., the elevator doors opened and Madeline Rivera stepped out, but this time, not as the housekeeper. Gone was the black and white uniform. In its place, a navy blue business suit, modest and sharp. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun. In her hand, she carried no tray, only a slim, dark leather portfolio. The same woman, but now the room saw her. Charles Whitmore was already at the table, along with his executives. They had been debriefing all morning, digesting the implications of the previous day. When Madeline entered, every conversation halted. Not because she demanded attention, but because she no longer blended into the background. She took her seat with quiet grace. She didn't ask for it. It had already been earned. Sheikh Rashid stood as she approached. A simple gesture, but one that sent a clear signal. Respect. The kind not given lightly in his world. "Ms. Rivera," he greeted, "I took the liberty of having my team revisit your work from your time at the Gulf Investment Authority. Your proposal on ESG integration in sovereign fund metrics, it was quite ahead of its time. Thank you, Your Excellency. That paper was part of my master's thesis. I'm still building on it in my doctoral research. One of Charles Whitmore's VPs, Alan Treadwell, mid-50s, the kind of man who'd spent his career in skyscraper boardrooms, couldn't help but interject. "Forgive me," he said, his voice tentative, "but I have to ask, how does someone with your background end up, well, working here?" Madeline didn't flinch. She turned slightly toward him, meeting his gaze with dignity. The 2008 crash wiped out most of the entry-level positions in finance. I had just graduated. Then my father passed away. He'd been our family's provider, and suddenly I had to step in for my mother and my younger sister. She paused. Hospitality offered flexible hours. It allowed me to support them while continuing my education. I didn't have the luxury of waiting for the perfect opportunity. Her words landed hard in the quiet room. Not bitter, just true. A subtle indictment of the system they all operated within, where talent wasn't enough, where timing mattered, where doors only opened for some. Sheikh Rashid gave a thoughtful nod. Sometimes life reroutes us. What matters is how we walk those paths. Charles Whitmore cleared his throat, eager to move the discussion forward, or perhaps away from the discomfort. "Well then, shall we proceed with the agreement?" Over the next 2 days, Madeline did more than translate. She became the hinge on which the entire negotiation turned. She didn't just bridge 2 languages, she bridged 2 philosophies. Charles's side was data-driven, performance-obsessed, structured around shareholder return. Rashid's side prioritized long-term stability, community impact, and the quiet currency of trust, the kind earned over years, not just quarterly earnings. And Madeline, she spoke both dialects, financially, culturally, humanly. When a disagreement flared over contingency voting rights, Madeline reframed it. To Sheikh Rashid, governance is about voice, not just value. In Gulf business culture, leadership carries an honor that cannot be overridden by algorithmic thresholds. She then turned to Whitmore. But your team isn't suggesting dominance. You're asking for guardrails to protect your board from risk exposure if metrics aren't met. Both men nodded. She continued. So the question is not who controls the board. It's how you both build a mechanism that respects accountability and dignity equally. The room was quiet. Then one of Sheikh Rashid's senior attorneys, a man who had spoken only in Arabic until then, leaned forward and said in English, "This woman should have been at this table from the beginning." I think we've all seen a version of this in real life. Maybe it's the intern who solves the problem that stumps the manager, or the school janitor who plays classical piano during lunch break time. One of my subscribers once wrote in about a Lyft driver, an older gentleman who used to be a surgeon in his home country. Life can be wildly unfair about who gets seen. And yet, moments like this, they remind us the cream doesn't just rise. It waits patiently, then pours in when the moment cracks open. By the afternoon of the 3rd day, the air in Suite 8701 had shifted completely. What had once been a cold war of silence and suspicion had evolved into warm debate, side smiles, even jokes. Revised drafts were passed around, clauses highlighted, compromises carefully crafted. Madeline suggested minor wording adjustments that had major consequences. She restructured a section of the performance clause to give Rashid's fund a pathway to maintain voting influence even in soft quarters, but only if they reinvested dividends into sustainability milestones. Charles Whitmore loved it. You found a way to turn ESG from a compliance burden into a reinvestment incentive. The Sheikh's legal advisor agreed. It protects us while advancing the mission. By 6:40 p.m., the final version was printed. 5 sets, 76 pages each. The deal was ready for preliminary signatures. Madeline sat back quietly, folding her hands, her work complete. Charles Whitmore's finance director approached her with a smile. Your consulting fee has been arranged. We've also included a stipend for any lost hotel wages. It was more than 6 months' worth of her current earnings. Sheikh Rashid stood and extended his hand. Ms. Rivera, he said, we are establishing a new sustainability division in New York, one that understands the intersection of long-term value and cultural intelligence. When you complete your doctorate, I'd like to formally discuss a role with us. Madeline blinked just once. I'd be honored, Your Excellency. Rashid smiled. Though, truthfully, I considered these past days interview enough.
The papers were signed. Pens clicked shut. Hands were shaken. Photos were taken for the press release, careful ones, framed perfectly to show partnership and progress. Charles Whitmore extended his hand to Sheikh Rashid with newfound respect, and the Sheikh returned the gesture with quiet strength. But as the others smiled for the camera, Madeline Rivera stepped back, away from the spotlight, gathering her notes and silently preparing to leave. Her job here was done, and she had a class to catch. Miss Rivera, the Sheikh said, approaching her with something in his hand, a small gift. It was a simple black velvet box. Inside, a fountain pen, elegant, weighty, inscribed in gold Arabic script with the words, "Judge the well by the water, not the ornaments." Her breath caught slightly as she looked up at him. May you continue to surprise those wise enough to see your true value, he said. She nodded, touched. Thank you, Your Excellency. As she left the suite, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. A junior executive, someone who had barely acknowledged her presence days before, instinctively stepped aside and held the door for her. A small gesture, but one that hadn't happened before. She noticed it. So did he. In the mirrored elevator, Madeline saw herself. Same posture, same uniform of professionalism, but everything had changed. Not because she had become someone new, but because others had finally seen who she had been all along. As the elevator descended floor by floor, a heavy silence settled between her and Charles Whitmore, who had slipped in at the last second. He was uncharacteristically quiet, hands folded, jaw tense. Then he spoke, voice softer than she'd ever heard it. I owe you an apology, Miss Rivera. She turned toward him, one brow slightly raised. Not just for failing to recognize your capabilities, but for failing to really see you at all, until your skills became useful to me. There was no dramatic pause, no forced apology, just a man, powerful, accomplished, acknowledging that he too had been blind. Madeline held his gaze, not with anger, but with calm clarity. The world, she said slowly, is full of invisible people, Mr. Whitmore. The woman who makes your lunch, the man who delivers your mail, the night shift who restocks your office supplies. They all have stories, degrees, dreams. Some of them might even be able to explain your balance sheet better than your CFO. Whitmore looked down, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. You've given me more to think about than any consultant ever has. Good, she said simply. As the elevator reached the lobby, the doors parted and Madeline stepped out.
a woman of quiet power. No entourage, no fanfare, just resolute. 6 months later, the skyline of Manhattan buzzed with new construction activity. The groundbreaking ceremony for the Hudson Green District attracted international media attention. Cameras captured Whitmore and Rashid side by side, hard hats on, shovels in hand, celebrating what journalists called an unlikely but revolutionary partnership. Reporters asked about the turning point. Neither man mentioned the translators or the legal advisors or the boardroom battles. They both mentioned a woman who asked to clarify one clause and ended up clarifying everything. At the new office of the Gulf Sustainability Fund in Midtown, a modest private desk had been prepared for Madeline Rivera, awaiting her graduation and official offer. On her first day there, she found a small, beautifully wrapped package resting on the desk. Inside, another fountain pen, this one engraved with the date of the negotiations' conclusion. No message, just a reminder of the moment everything changed. What happened in that suite wasn't just about financial clarity. It was about the power of being underestimated. It was about what happens when you choose to speak up, even when the world tells you to stay quiet. When you dare to interrupt a system that has ignored you. When you use your voice not to demand, but to deliver. Madeline's story reminds us that brilliance isn't always behind corner office glass. Sometimes it's holding a coffee tray, folding towels, staying late, waiting for a moment where courage meets preparation. There's a phrase I once read: talent is evenly distributed. Opportunity is not. But every now and then, someone creates their own opportunity by refusing to stay invisible. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt like you were standing just outside the door, I hope you remember this story. Speak, step forward, clarify the clause. Because the world changes not when the powerful speak louder, but when the quiet are finally heard. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently, make sure to subscribe to John Stories channel, where we share real human drama, one powerful moment at a time.